Hi, in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how we take our unwrapped UV cube and we're going to export it out of Blender and bring it over into Photoshop so we can do two things. We're going to hand paint on it for a little bit, and then we're going to apply some image textures that we've downloaded from the web. Okay, so you first want to come over here to your UV window. You want to press A so you can select all. That's really important. You then want to come down here and go to the UVs menu. You then want to choose Export UV Layout, and if you look here in the bottom left hand corner, it's going to choose the format, which is a PNG, which is what we want. I'm going to now click on my desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll call this Cube UV Layout, and I'll save it to the desktop. Okay, so now it's a standard PNG file. I'll now go into Photoshop and do File, Open. Go to my desktop and find it. And there it is right there. You can see all the UVs. I'm going to rename my layer here, so I'll just call this UV, just so it's nice and clear. Generally, you want your UV layer to be on top of everything, so that way you can see your boundaries and you can see your borders and things like that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and I'll go ahead and choose a color here. Okay, so I can just basically start painting right now. If I want to go ahead and zoom in a little bit, and I can just start painting. I'm not going to paint anything terribly amazing. Whoops. I'm not going to paint anything terribly amazing today, and that's because it's not really about the artistry of this, it's just about the technical settings. Okay, so you can see that I can go ahead and paint here. One thing that you can't do right now is you can't just use the paint bucket tool and go ahead and fill it in, and that's because I'm on an empty layer, and so it would fill in the whole thing here. So we'll talk about using selections and things like that, so that way you can go ahead and do it. You'll notice that I'm painting outside of the lines, and that's fine down here. It's completely fine. You wouldn't want to really paint over into the other area because that will go into the other area there. Okay, so now for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and maybe I'll go ahead and put I'll just mark a number 1 on that side there. Now for layers, I could keep this as one layer and then just start painting all of my other stuff. If you want a little bit more control, you would go ahead and you'd make a whole nother layer, and then you would go ahead and you do your work. And the benefit of doing this, even though it does take a little bit more time, of course, is that you can then adjust and move the layers. You can scale them, you can rotate them, all that kind of good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause my recording, and I'm going to fill in a little bit more of these, and then I'll come back and I'll show you photographs. Okay, so we're back, and you can see that I've got 4 separate layers over here on the right, different colors, and of course different numbers. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to one of my favorite sites here. This is Texture King. Make sure that when you're downloading a texture that you click on the texture until you see the largest version of that texture. And you can see I can zoom in it and really see it. I'm now going to right click, I'll save image as, and I'll save it to my desktop. And I'm going to just go ahead and call this Rust 01, save, and now I'll go ahead and grab another category here. I'll just go to wood, and let's go ahead and grab this one here. Okay, so those are the 2 textures there. Now I'm going to bring them into Photoshop, so I'll do File, Open, and I'll go to my desktop, and I'll go ahead and grab the Rust one first. So the first thing you'll hopefully notice is that this is a rectangular texture, and it is going to be applied to a square UV here. So I could do one of 2 things. If I bring it in and I stretch it to make it fit, it will fit, but it'll be distorted and won't look good. I don't like to do distortion, so I'm imagining that I'm going to just fill up a square here, and that will mean that the left side and the right side, some of that will get hidden. So okay, so now how do I bring this in? There's a bunch of ways to bring things in to another image. So I'm going to come over here and you'll notice on the right hand side it says background and it's locked. I'm going to double left click to unlock it and I'm just going to say OK, and now you'll see that it's unlocked. So one easy way that I like to do this is I like to come over here to the layer. I like to right mouse click and then choose duplicate layer. It then asks you, what do you want to call this layer and where do you want its destination to be? So I'm going to go ahead and title this layer Rust, and I'm going to make its destination to be my cube UV layout ping, and that's this image over here. When I hit OK, I can now come over here and you'll see that it did come over, and it's absolutely huge, but you can see that it's over here and it's on top of everything. So it's really, really huge. So how do I scale it down? Well, I'm going to come up here and choose the Move tool. And with the Move tool selected, with the Move tool selected, you have a couple options up here. With the Move tool selected, you want to make sure you turn off Auto Select. That should not really be on. And you want to make sure that Show Transform Controls is turned on. So that's checked on. So now I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, I keep having the wrong layer selected. There we go. So now I can move my Rust layer around, and that's good and all, but I want to resize it. So the way that you can do it manually is you want to come to a corner. It has to be one of the four corners, and it doesn't matter which one. And when you do this, you want to hold down the Shift key. So it's Shift, left click, and drag. So I'm doing Shift, left click, and dragging in, and then it gets smaller, and then I just drag it on back. And there you go. So you can just keep doing that manually. Now if you don't want to do it manually, what you can do is after you do your first Shift, left click, and drag in, you can come up here and you'll actually see a little width and height box up here. So what you can do is you can type in here, you can just type and say, okay, 25% is still way too big, I want to do 15%. And you can type in 15%. You'll notice that it changed to a square when I did this. And the reason why is that I need to click on this little chain link here. And what that does is make sure that the width and the height stay the same percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. Now I'm pretty happy, and if I bring it down here, you see the 15% is still a little bit too much, so I can just manually drag it down. Again, I'm shift clicking and manually dragging it in. So the top and the bottom line up. And you can see that my left and my right hand side there's going to be some spillover, but that's okay. So I'm pretty happy with the placement there. When you're done manipulating a layer, you want to click on either the little check box up here to say accept, or click on this one here to cancel. I'm going to click to accept, and now here's my Rust layer, and I can move it to whichever one I want, and I'm going to leave it right here. And you'll notice it's covering up my green number 4, so that way it's a nice clean transition. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that with another texture very quickly here. I'll go ahead and just do File Open, open up the wood texture. Here it appears. I'll double click to unlock it, right click to duplicate. I'll call it wood. Its destination is going to be my UV layout. Comes in, and again it's ginormous. I'll shift, left click and drag just to make it smaller. This time I'm going to click on the little chain link so that way they're locked, and I'm going to go ahead and make it about 13%. I think 13. And with this texture, I'm going to do 18. So I'm going to say 18, and I'm going to say OK, and I'll go ahead and drag it down here. And you can see I'm a little bit off, so I'm just going to shift, left click, and fix the height. There we go. And then do a little checkbox to say yes. Now here's where you can say if you don't want that knot there, you know, I could go ahead and move it over so the knot is kind of cropped out. If you do purposely want it in there, you can go ahead and put it in there. So I'll put it in there. Okay, so that's it. Those are in there. It's not a pretty texture at all, but it certainly will work. Now I highly recommend that you always save your Photoshop file so that way you can come back and you can work on it if something happens. So I would do File, Save As. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I'm going to call it CubeUVLayout.psd. And here's what's really important. The format needs to say Photoshop. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Save. And now if I need to come back and move any layers around or do anything, I'm good to go. Okay, so now the last couple steps. First of all, I do not want to see the UV layout in my Blender file. So before I save this, I need to hide the UV layout, and I'm just going to go ahead and hide that. Next, you can bring a Photoshop file into Blender. That's a nice kind of newish, semi-newish feature. But I like to save my images out as pings. So my last step is File, Save As, one last time. I'm going to change the format back to a ping file. Now, if you recall, my original file, when I brought it out of Blender, was cubevlayout.ping. So I don't want to call it that, otherwise it will erase the original. So I'm going to go ahead and call this cubevcolor. So this is all my color information. And I'll go ahead and hit save and hit OK. Alright, I'll leave Photoshop open and I'll go back to Blender. And now I've got my UV layout here, and now I need to bring in and see the texture. So what I'm going to do is the bottom of my UV window, I'll press Open Image, go to my desktop, and I'll go find the image. If you have a ton of things on your desktop, what you can do is you can come up here, and there are 3 little buttons here. The third button will allow you to see your thumbnails here. And here's the image here, and I'll hit Open Image. Okay, so I'll zoom out, and you can see everything's looking all right, but it's not showing up over here. So what gives? Well, if I tab out and I press P to play the game, you'll notice that I get shadows and lighting, but I get no texture. So what's going on? Well, there's a couple things. Down here at the bottom of your 3D window, we need to change the viewport shading. That needs to be changed to either texture or material, either one of them. So I'll change it to texture, and you'll notice that there it is. They're right there. So that's pretty good. If I go to material, you'll see that I don't see anything. So it seems like texture is the way to go. A couple other things. We want to make sure that you're in the Blender game engine. We then want to come over here to the render panel over here on the right hand side. It's a little camera panel. We want to come down, and we need to always come here to shading and choose GLSL. If we choose GLSL, what that does is it really shows us what this is going to look like in game. And you'll notice that it basically went away. Even if we choose material, it isn't showing it to us. So again, what gives? Well, the reason why, and you can see if we play, we get nothing. The reason why is because we haven't actually assigned this texture to the object. So now we're going to come over here to the far right, and we're going to play with the material panel and the texture panel. So for the material panel, I'm going to go ahead and delete this material. Now, if you have no material, you would add in a new material, and I'm going to go ahead and call this UV Cube Matte. Okay, so there's my new material. We're not going to give it a color because we're using the UV. Now we need to come to the texture panel, and under the texture panel we're going to click on New. I'm going to go ahead and call this UV Cube Text, just to be specific. The type always needs to be set to image or movie, and it's done there, but you see the preview says nothing and the image says nothing, and that's why it's not showing up over here. So under image, I already have my image loaded, so I'm going to click on this little pop-up and choose Cube UV Color, and now you'll see it showing up. Now if I press play in game, it's actually showing up. So that's working all right. I'm going to change my light just so you guys can see better. So I'm going to change it to a Hemi light, and that way you can see all sides regardless of it. So there it is right there. You can see all the sides being pretty lit. It's not realistic, but it's being pretty lit. So the only problem now is that if you look at this, you'll notice that the textures, some of them are upright and some of them are not. So, so what could I do here? Well, the 3 is on its side. So if I select the face there and then I select the face over here, I could go ahead and rotate this inside the UV layout. And if I rotate this here, let's see, and I'm rotating it 90 degrees. So I could manually do it, or what I could do is I could just press R, type in 90, and then there you go. So that's the typical workflow. As you look at how it got applied, you can see how it is. I don't like the way the number 1 is, so for the number 1, I'm just going to go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. Left click to accept, and now it's going right. The 2 looks fine, but if you didn't like it facing that way, you could rotate it over here. Same thing with the textures here, just to show you. Here's the wood texture. If I didn't like it, I could go ahead and rotate it, and I could put the knot down at the bottom, and I could do things like that. So that's it. That's basically taking your UV cube, unwrapping it with seams, and bringing it into Photoshop, doing a little hand painting, not a very good job, but doing UV painting, and then doing a couple textures and bringing it back into Blender and getting it set up. That's it. So I'll see you next time.